Malta is a collection of islands that form one of the world's smallest countries, lying just 80 kilometres south of Sicily in the Mediterranean Sea. Yet there are dozens of ancient temples, 7 of which are UNESCO World Heritage listed. Indeed, UNESCO describes these prehistoric temples as the oldest freestanding monuments on Earth, even older than Stonehenge or the pyramids in Egypt, although this is up for debate. At the end of 2013, we paid the islands of Malta and Gozo a visit to see these temples made from huge megalithic blocks, said in local folklore to be built by giants. The shape of these temples is pretty unique, and possibly represents the head, arms and legs of a deity called Venus. Some have interesting patterns carved into the walls, and on the inside we saw some form of shelving that can also be found a significant distance away, just off the coast of northern Scotland. We also filmed some megalithic structures that we have been documenting at various places around the world, such as standing stones and dolmen, as well as a less common feature left behind by our ancestors.
So Malta is not only famous for its temples, it's also well known for cart ruts, such as this one behind me. Now, this area that we've come to here is called Clapham Junction, and it's for obvious reasons, because you can see one set of cart ruts going off in this direction, then there is a second set coming off in this direction, and there's also a third coming in here. So this is a massive junction here. Now these cart ruts lead all over this area of rock behind me. Now this is the area of the planet where these are most concentrated. They're all over the island. We've only been here for 2 days, and yesterday, just walking to the beach, we came across 3 areas where they had these cart ruts. They're also found in France and Spain and Switzerland and Portugal, which is kind of just across the water, but also in Azerbaijan, Brazil, Bolivia, and in the middle of the Atlantic they've been found on the islands of Azores. Now, explanations for these are pretty weak. The official story is that these were just carved out by years and years of usage of carts that were moving stones from quarries to the temples. But there's a few problems with that explanation, and one being that they haven't found any wheels on the island, and the second being that none of these cart ruts actually lead to any of the temples. Now, they're a very interesting feature because they go really deep. This one we're walking up here is about 60 centimeters deep. In different areas they're shallower, so if you're imagining carts moving up and down these, then you would think that they would be the same sort of depth all the way along. So the official story is a little bit weak. There are alternative stories also to do with ley lines, to do with energies, all sorts of things to do with ancient civilizations possibly having technology.
The width of the ruts is inconsistent. Sometimes they are just 10 centimeters wide, and other times more like 40 to 50. This didn't make sense to us because these wider ruts must have materialized due to a number of adjacent tracks being carved and then merging into one. But if they were made by wheels repetitively wearing down the rock, surely they would always run in the same place and always be the same width as the wheels. There are locations where the ruts seem to be multi-layered, as if one rut has been carved out and then another created right next to it, again not really making sense. Maybe these observations can be explained by the ruts being created with one sweep or one passing of a certain tool or vehicle, rather than carved out over many years. In fact, there are many places on the island where there seems to be evidence to counter the cart argument. The distance between the parallel lines remains pretty consistent, only varying by a couple of inches and generally resembling modern railway tracks. But we did find a single rut on its own further down the hill at Clapham Junction, and there are other places where there is just one single rut embedded in the rock. There are also other locations where there are many ruts in close succession which didn't seem to fit in with the cart hypothesis. Some of the ruts are shaped like a U, while others take the form of a V, and some of the ruts look random and carelessly bumpy with ridges at the bottom, while others look intentionally carved. There is also a model in a museum at one of the temples demonstrating that the rocks were actually moved by rolling them on small spherical rocks, so there seems to be an awful lot of guesswork and inconsistency with the theories behind this phenomenon. Right next to the Clapham Junction site you find some tombs which are cut through the ruts and are estimated to have been built from the 7th century BC to the 3rd century AD. The ruts themselves are impossible to date on their own, so an association has been made between the tombs and these mysterious parallel lines. Yet this is a weak association, as a very small percentage of the total number of cart ruts found on the island are geographically linked to the tombs. An English archaeologist called David Trump believes that they date to around 1000 BC because he observed at a few sites the ruts ran up to the entrance of Bronze Age villages. But with at least 150 rut locations on the island, we feel this could be just a coincidence. Here's some more cart ruts. We're now walking between Rabat and Mjar, and again on the side of the road There's some obvious cart ruts, but we have a junction here as well. The ruts are found in varying locations, some as short as 50 metres, while others are supposed to stretch on for a couple of kilometres, which puts into doubt the theory that they were just used for transporting heavy stones from quarries to temples, as you don't need to travel that far to find a good source of stone on Malta. We saw them running in straight lines, around curves, and up and down hills. One example climbs a hill at an angle of 45 degrees, a highly difficult manoeuvre if moving heavy stone. Moving quarried stones is the most popular explanation for these ruts, with numerous archaeologists having carried out investigations, such as Conti and Saliba, who surveyed more than a few hundred different sites and recorded that 31 had a clear association with quarries. But the fact remains that many do not, and the association can be very weak, as the ruts do not always lead up to the quarries. We are not exactly convinced that all of the sites designated as quarries are actually that. We accidentally came across a few, and they were so small we didn't even realise that that was what they were. Some are not deep, roughly 1 metre in height, and they form rectangular indents into the limestone that could easily be foundations for buildings. And the islands are filled with caverns, rock-cut structures and catacombs, so maybe these rectangular indents were some kind of different structure altogether. So here's some more cart ruts. These ones here are not far from the commune where we're staying. Right next to the roundabout, just outside of Majar. Right next to the road. Really interesting ones as well, we think. They go really deep. This one here is quite deep, as you can see. And then they sort of lead into a massive carved out section. Of course, impossible to know when this was done, but possibly related to the cart ruts. This one here is the deepest we've seen on the island, I would say. This one is probably 60-70 centimetres. This one as well, leading up to there. This last site was close to an eco-friendly project where we volunteered for a week, which started our interest in the Back to Nature movement, where people refusing to accept the ever-increasingly controlling system are seeking to build their own accommodation, grow their own food and use alternative forms of currency, something the Maltese seem very open to. We visited Gozo and found cart ruts seemingly going nowhere, i.e. they were not even close to any temples or quarries. And as we hiked all over the islands, we kept coming across other signs that suggested the cart hypothesis was wrong. Some travel off the end of cliffs, with others one parallel line is deeper than the other. Sometimes they just seem to stop out of the blue, and some of them are huge.
So we've come to a place called St Paul's Bay, or close to St Paul's Bay, to have a look at some more cart ruts, and you can see them running along this way here. If we follow these ones up, you can see a massive cart rut or some sort of channel. I mean, this is completely and utterly unlike anything, you know, we've seen on the island so far. It's huge. This would have been a cart rut for giants, although, you know, there's a lot of folklore about there being giants on the island. There's one here, there's another one at the back there, there's a slightly smaller one just over this side as well, so interesting feature. It also turns around here and there's sort of what looks like more modern sort of caverns going into the wall here as well, but God knows what this is for or was for. Or so here we're at another site with some cart ruts. It's just outside Rabat in a town called Matafa, and we're noticing a similar feature that we seem to be seeing at a lot of these cart ruts, and that's a bloody great circle cut into the ground. Now these ones here, they're not like Clapham Junction where they're crossing over, but there's quite a lot of them. You can see them stretching on for here about 50 metres. Down the back here they go underneath the house. Some at the top here they seem to just stop. So it's quite interesting. And what we're noticing here is a lot of vegetation is growing in the cart ruts, and that makes us think that when they built these things, maybe that was what they were used for. Maybe they were They were filled with soil and conglomerate and water, which when wet could have been used to conduct electricity or conduct different types of telluric energy. Imagine like giant wires on an earth grid, or maybe they were used for irrigation or something like that. So it's not as complete as Clapham Junction. The ruts aren't as deep, but it's still interesting nonetheless. And up here we've got the two Carter ruts going along, and the one on the right seems to finish before the one on the left, which is interesting. Quite an interesting sight, but not the most pleasant because we're surrounded by buildings here, but interesting nonetheless.
One of the main reasons that causes us to question the aging of these structures is their underwater presence. We videoed them on the east of the island where they lead off into the water, where you also find quite a few circular silos and some rectangular shapes carved into the rock that I bet are considered to be quarries. A few of the silos also seem to have a kind of rut coming out of them, again shedding doubt on the cart theory. There are also other cart ruts found underwater, so it is believed by some that they were created before the last ice age when the water level was considerably lower. This theory is backed up by the testimony of researchers in the early 1900s who recorded the presence of ruts on a tiny island about 5 kilometers south of the Hagar-Kim temples, as well as ruts running off the cliffs nearby in the direction of the island. The purpose of the cart ruts has been the subject of debate for hundreds of years, and in modern times you can find hundreds of suggestions for their creation, from irrigation ditches for the distribution of water, channels to carry soil, channels to guide cows transporting agricultural produce. Others speculate that they perhaps had an astronomical purpose, and Eric von Daniken theorised in his book Chariots of the Gods that these tracks were influenced or built by aliens. Most of the theories suffer from one problem or another, which means that the controversy as to what the cart ruts might be continues. Since our visit to the island, other ruts have been found around the world, like those found in Mexico, the numerous locations in Italy, and large numbers are spread around Turkey. On our visit to India, we found some carvings in the rock that look similar to the ruts in Bolivia, and there are also reports of them being found in Greece and Germany. We have been documenting megaliths all over the world and believe that together they form a huge piece of evidence to show that there once existed a global civilization in our ancient past. Joined with other pieces of evidence, we also believe that this civilization was highly advanced and a lot older than mainstream academics estimate. Some of this evidence suggests there are energies moving through the ground, forming ley lines and a grid around the world, and we wonder if these ruts were in some way used to manipulate or direct these energies, in the same way the pyramids and other megalithic sites do. We would like to thank megalithic.co.uk for the amazing source of information they provide about various ancient structures, as we quite simply would not have found half the sites on Malta without their help. Take a look at some of the other films on our YouTube channel to see some of this evidence around the planet, and please subscribe to be informed of our future releases.